The first call came in at 2:43 a.m. on December 17, 1995. Mayday, Mayday, this is Whittier Harbor Authority. We have a situation. Multiple civilians are attacking each other, biting, screaming. We need... Then the signal cut to static. I was stationed at a U.S. Coast Guard outpost in Kodiak at the time, a communications officer who hadn't seen anything more stressful than the occasional drunk fisherman getting lost in the fog. When that first transmission came through the shortwave, I thought it was a hoax. Maybe a prank, maybe a misheard fight. But then a second call came in from a private fishing vessel, its captain breathless and panicked. "They're tearing each other apart," he said. "My God, I saw a man rip a woman's jaw clean off. They're not right. Their eyes, they're black, like pitch. We're leaving the dock now. We're not waiting." I logged the calls, sent a report up the chain, and waited for orders. None came. The next morning, Whittier was quiet. Too quiet. The town's harbor radio was dead. Phone lines were silent. All satellite images had been lost to cloud cover, convenient if you're the paranoid type. By sunset, Command issued a blanket order. Do not respond to any further transmissions from the Whittier area. The official story was a localized chemical spill, and that environmental containment teams were en route. We were told to forget everything we heard, but I couldn't. Not when the tapes I'd recorded started to go missing from the storage room. Not when my commanding officer, Lieutenant Morris, went silent for 3 days and returned looking like he hadn't slept in a year. Not when I began receiving anonymous faxes, yes, faxes, in the dead of night. They came from a line I didn't recognize. The sender was never listed, but each sheet was stamped, confidential, do not distribute. One showed a declassified report from 1984 referencing a similar outbreak in Barrow, Alaska. Another mentioned Nome in 1992. Same symptoms: aggression, necrosis, black eyes, and a hunger for flesh. I thought it was a sick joke, some twisted conspiracy nut trying to spook me, that is, until the photographs came. Black and white, low resolution, clearly taken in a hurry, but unmistakable. Bodies shredded beyond recognition, faces locked in mid-scream, eyes wide and dark, bite marks on torsos, arms, necks. One image showed a man with his chest opened like a broken door, a gnaw mark where his heart should have been. The final image showed a group of men in hazmat suits, military, loading several bodies onto a flatbed truck. Only one of them had moved. I knew because the timestamp changed. The corpse sat up. From that point on, I started digging. I knew it could cost me my job, maybe more. But I couldn't stop. Something had happened in Whittier, and the deeper I looked, the more I realized it wasn't an isolated incident. The pathogen, if that's what it even was, didn't start in '95. It was older, much older. An incident report I found in a forgotten corner of the National Archives described a 1952 military expedition that uncovered a frozen anomaly buried in the permafrost near the old Soviet border. The document was heavily redacted, but 2 phrases stood out to me. Biological material still viable. Subject displays predatory reanimation. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a freak infection. It was a weapon, buried, thawed, and repurposed. And in the chaos of the Cold War, what better place to test it than the most remote corners of the world? Whittier, Barrow, Nome, they were experiments. When I confronted Lieutenant Morris, he didn't deny it. He just looked at me with dead eyes and said, "If you value your life, forget Whittier." You never heard those calls. You never saw those reports. And then he walked into the freezing sea that same night. No one ever found his body. That was 30 years ago. Now ice is melting faster than ever. Entire layers of permafrost are disappearing. The news says it's climate change, but I've seen the satellite scans. Things are surfacing. Old sites, buried research labs, bunkers long forgotten. And people are starting to get sick again. I kept all the faxes, all the recordings, the photographs. I've compiled everything I know into this account. I've hidden copies everywhere I can. If you're reading this, it means I'm already gone. Or worse, changed. They're going to tell you it was a hoax. But I'm telling you the truth. There was a zombie outbreak in Alaska in 1995, and it was covered up. I was 28 years old when I ignored my orders and drove north. It took me 3 days to reach Whittier from Kodiak. I didn't take the main highways. I followed freight routes, back roads, and shipping contacts who owed me favors. I wasn't the only one who'd heard the broadcasts, though most pretended they hadn't. Those who admitted to it couldn't meet my eyes. They said things like, "That town's been gone," or "You didn't hear what you think you did." But I knew what I heard, and I had the tapes to prove it. Whittier sat like a forgotten scar on the edge of Prince William Sound. In 1995, fewer than 200 people lived there, most tucked inside the towering Begich Towers complex. One building, all of them under one roof. That's what made the outbreak spread so fast, and what made the cleanup easy. When I arrived, the tunnel into town was barricaded, concrete blocks, rusted signs that read, "No entry, contaminated zone." The area looked abandoned. No guards, no security, no vehicles. But there were cameras. I spotted them nestled in pine trees and tucked under frozen eaves. Someone was still watching. I left the truck half a mile back and hiked the rest. Wind howled down from the mountains like a warning. Snow crunched under my boots. It was quiet. Too quiet. Even in dead winter, you expect birds, distant howls, anything. But Whittier was a vacuum. A stillness that gnawed at your ears. The first thing I noticed when I passed the barricade was the smell. Not rot exactly, something chemical, like burnt hair mixed with antiseptic. The smell of something that died, was cleaned up and then burned anyway. Just to be sure. I found the Begich Towers completely boarded up, windows painted over, the front doors chained. But I got inside through the maintenance hatch in the basement, a rusted, half-frozen crawl space barely big enough to squeeze through. Inside, it was dark. My flashlight beam skittered across old furniture, waterlogged carpet, and mold-streaked walls. The place looked like it had been evacuated in a hurry. Dishes still sat in sinks, coats hung by doors, but everything was coated in a thin layer of frost, as if time had stopped in the middle of a breath. And the scratch marks, they were everywhere. On the inside of doors, on the walls, on the floor, fingernails. I found one still embedded in the drywall, snapped in half, stained red-brown. I moved deeper into the complex. Up stairwells, down hallways. Every floor had signs of struggle, dried blood, overturned furniture. One room had a mattress dragged up against the door with duct tape and soup cans tied to the handle, a makeshift alarm. Inside was a journal. The last entry read, "They keep scratching at the door. All night. They don't talk. They just breathe. If anyone finds this, don't come here. Don't trust the noise. They're learning." That's when I heard the knock. 3 soft raps. From the other side of the hallway, I whipped around. Nothing. No one. Then I heard it again, knock, 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 closer this time. It echoed through the corridor, bouncing off the peeling walls and long-abandoned silence. I wasn't alone. I turned off my flashlight, my breath steamed in the air, and I pressed my back against the wall. For 30 seconds, everything went still. Then I saw it. Down the hall, past the flickering remnants of emergency lighting, something moved. Slow, twitchy, like a puppet with tangled strings. It stepped into view and tilted its head, too far, until I heard a pop. Its skin was bluish, slick with something oily. Its eyes were black. No whites, no pupils, just pits. Hungry, depthless. It didn't growl, it didn't charge. It smiled. I ran. Down stairwells, through broken doorways, heart hammering like a machine gun. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I could hear it, its bare feet slapping against the tiles. That awful wet breathing echoing behind me. I made it back to the crawl space and dove through, slamming the metal hatch shut behind me. My hands bled from clawing through ice and concrete. My ribs ached from where I'd slammed into a pipe. But I got out, and the last thing I heard, before the wind drowned out the world again, was laughter. Not human. Not right. A chorus of broken throats. Something else was down there. I didn't stop driving until I reached a gas station outside Anchorage. I walked into the bathroom, stared at my own reflection, and vomited. What I saw in Whittier wasn't just a virus. It wasn't rage or madness. It was organized. I made one call, a secure line I hadn't used since I left active duty. The man who answered didn't speak my name, just said, "You went in, didn't you?" I didn't answer. "Meet me in Fairbanks," he said. "Bring everything." Then he hung up. His name was Dr. Howard Kessler, ex-CDC, ex-DARPA. Vanished in 1993 after an ethics scandal involving human trials. The kind of guy who knew too much and refused to play along. He'd been watching the Outbreak sites for years. Said Whittier was only the beginning. That the virus, or organism, or whatever it was evolving. And worse, it had learned how to lie. Dr. Howard Kessler didn't look like a disgraced government scientist. He looked like someone who'd spent the past decade in a bunker, nursing paranoia like a drink. He met me outside a boarded-up laundromat in Fairbanks at 2 a.m. He wore a parka with a torn hood and carried a revolver in his pocket like it was loose change. No hello, no handshake, just a jerk of his head and the words, "Did anything follow you?" I told him no. He didn't believe me. We entered through a back alley, down a creaking staircase, and into a reinforced storm shelter that reeked of copper, ammonia, and old books. The walls were lined with steel shelves stacked with files, reel-to-reel tapes, crumbling folders, and equipment that looked older than either of us. "This is where the truth lives," he said. "For now." He offered me coffee. I said no. My hands were still shaking from Whittier. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile, wide, skin stretched too tight, like it was trying to look human. Kessler noticed. "You saw one of them," he said flatly. "One of the intelligent ones." I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. "I warned them in '87, he continued, pacing the concrete floor. "Told them the virus wasn't like anything we'd catalogued. It doesn't just kill cells, it rewrites them, coaxes them. There's no immune response because it makes the body believe it's healing." He pulled a thick black binder from a shelf and tossed it onto a metal table. "Operation Cicada. DARPA file, top clearance. The virus was discovered in 1951 by a joint Soviet-American expedition in Siberia. Something ancient thawed out of the ice. A carcass. Unrecognizable. They took samples. He flipped through photos, hazmat suits, lab containers, dissected tissue. Within a week, every researcher in that lab was dead or infected. But not mindless. That's the lie. Most of the infected start rabid, yes, driven by hunger. But given time, the virus adapts. It builds new neural pathways. It remembers. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Every virus we'd ever known either killed the host or turned it into a vegetable. This thing was learning. Some of them talk now, Kessler added, quieter. Imitate voices, personalities. It's mimicry, like deep-sea predators that use bioluminescence to lure prey. I thought back to the knock I'd heard in Whittier. The way it mirrored mine. Whittier was a test, he said, like he was reading my mind. A live field experiment. They released strain E into the population, watched the transmission vectors, measured infection speed, recorded the result. "You're saying they planned it?" He laughed once, hollow. "Planned it. They funded it." I stared at him. My mouth was dry. "They were trying to create the perfect bioweapon," Kessler said, "a controllable virus that could disable enemy populations without damaging infrastructure. But it got away from them. The virus doesn't want to be controlled. It wants to spread." He showed me maps, charts, spreadsheets tracking outbreaks going back to 1964. Most were small, contained within weeks. Gas leaks, freak riots, wild animal attacks. But the patterns were clear. Every few years, a new strain appears. Slight mutations, longer incubation, smarter hosts. The current version, strain K, was last seen near Atkasuk. That was 6 months ago. I pointed to a pinned location on the map. "But it's here now." Kessler nodded grimly. "They brought it south, probably buried in transport containers, masked as climate research. They think it's dormant in cold storage." "Is it?" "I don't know," he said. "But I do know this. Strain K doesn't die like the others. We've incinerated infected tissue at 1800 degrees, still viable, not alive, but not dead." He paused and lowered his voice. "I've seen tissue samples move without a body." I didn't want to believe him. Every word made me feel like I was slipping further into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But I had seen things, heard things, that couldn't be explained. And deep down, I knew he was right. I asked him why he stayed, why he hadn't run or disappeared completely. He walked to a locked drawer and pulled out a cassette tape. The label read, Barrow Recovery, January 1985. He loaded it into a player and hit play. The audio crackled. Then came a child's voice, humming a lullaby. Followed by another voice, identical, then a third, and a fourth. All overlapping, all the same pitch, same tone, all wrong. Only one child survived Barrow, Kessler whispered, but this tape was recorded 2 weeks later, in the containment cell. I reached to stop the tape. He grabbed my hand. Listen. There was a moment of silence, then the voice on the tape said, Are you listening now, Dr. Kessler? We remember you. I jerked away. The room felt colder, smaller. They're evolving, he said. They've gone beyond infection. This is cognitive colonization, a virus with memory, with purpose. I asked the question I didn't want to ask. What does it want? Kessler's eyes were hollow. To replace us. Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe. The next morning, I watched the sunrise over Fairbanks. Though watched is generous. The sky turned from black to slate to a pale blue, as if the cold itself didn't care about the sun anymore. Kessler hadn't slept. He stayed up cataloguing samples, comparing viral mutation patterns on a wall-sized flowchart that looked like a serial killer's murder board. I sat on a cot in the corner, trying to convince myself I was still part of the living world. We need to find her, he said at dawn. Who? The girl from Barrow. She's alive. I tracked her to Anchorage 2 years ago. Witness protection. She changed her name, started over. I thought he was joking. You mean the one from the cassette? The one the virus mimicked? She survived the initial outbreak in 1984. Her parents didn't. Nobody knows how. She was 5, silent for months. Then one day she just started talking again. But something was wrong. She remembered things she shouldn't. Military terms, autopsy procedures, and she said things no 5-year-old should know. Kessler slid a photo across the table. It was grainy, black and white. A little girl with dark hair and eyes too large for her face. She was sitting in a chair, staring at the camera with the flat expression of someone watching the world through glass. Name at the time was Lila Grace Monroe. Now she goes by Claire Asher, works at a library in Eagle River just outside Anchorage, keeps to herself. And you think she remembers something? Kessler rubbed his eyes. I think something remembers through her. The drive south was long and quiet. Kessler didn't talk much, and I didn't press him. I spent most of it listening to old Coast Guard tapes, ones I'd pulled from our backup archive. Most were static and garbled nonsense, but one caught my attention. It was dated December 18, 1995, one day after the Whittier distress call. This is Bravo 6. Evac of Site E failed. Repeat, failed. They're inside, posing as personnel. Command doesn't know who's who anymore, requesting immediate sterilization. Then a loud crack, followed by static. I didn't play the rest. By the time we reached Eagle River, the wind had picked up again. Pine trees bent like they were bowing to something invisible. The clouds hung low, swollen and grey. The library was small, single-story, tucked between a gas station and a church. The parking lot was empty except for a blue sedan with government plates. Kessler and I exchanged a look. Inside, the place was warm, too warm. The air was heavy with the scent of old pages and disinfectant. A bell above the door jingled as we entered. She was behind the front desk. Claire Asher. Older now, maybe mid-20s. Pale, thin. Her eyes were the same, though, that wide, almost preoccupied gaze. She looked up as we approached and gave a soft, unreadable smile. "Can I help you?" Kessler stepped forward. "Claire, my name is Dr. Howard Kessler. We need to talk to you about Barrow." The smile didn't fade, but her posture changed. She stiffened, hands disappearing behind the desk. "I'm sorry," she said. "I think you have the wrong person." "You were 5 years old," Kessler continued. "Your mother's name was Ava. Your father was John. They both worked at the geothermal station outside Barrow." Something flickered in her eyes, a faint glint of recognition quickly buried. I don't know what you're talking about. I stepped forward, softer. Claire, we're not here to hurt you. We're trying to stop what happened from happening again. Please. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly and motioned for us to follow her into the back office. The moment the door closed behind us, she turned the deadbolt. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. Kessler lowered his voice. Then help us. Tell us what you remember. She sat at a small desk, hands folded in front of her. Her eyes didn't move from the table. I remember fire, she said, screaming. I remember my dad locking me in the basement. He told me not to open the door for anyone. Not even him. She paused. Her voice grew quieter. I heard him knocking 2 days later. He was crying, begging. Said he was cold, hungry. Said he needed me. But I didn't open it. A beat. Because I could hear him breathing on the other side. And it wasn't right. My stomach twisted. Claire looked up. That wasn't the last time I heard him. Sometimes I still do. At night, in dreams. And sometimes when I'm awake. Kessler stepped forward. What do you mean? She hesitated, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a small audio recorder. She pressed play. Crackling, a faint whine. Then, Claire, it's me. Let me in. I miss you. I'm hungry. The voice was soft, familiar, wrong. It repeated. The same words, but slightly different each time, as if it were practicing. Claire, it's me. I love you. Let me in. Kessler shut it off. You've been in contact, he said, eyes wide. No, she replied, it's been in contact with me. She stood, walked to the back wall and pulled aside a bookshelf. Behind it was a steel door, locked with 3 bolts. What is that? I asked. Claire looked at me, her expression deadly serious. They left something behind in Barrow, a piece of it. She unlocked the bolts one by one. You need to see it for yourself. Kessler reached out. Claire, wait. The final bolt slid open. The door creaked. Cold air spilled out, impossibly cold, like stepping into the mouth of a glacier. Inside was a small walk-in freezer. In the center, encased in reinforced glass, was a human hand. Still twitching. Its fingernails scraped the inside of the glass in slow, rhythmic patterns, like Morse code. I took a step back. Kessler turned white. It's still alive, he breathed. No, Claire said. It's still thinking. The fingers inside the glass box didn't stop moving. Kessler leaned in close, scribbling notes, but I couldn't. I couldn't look at it for more than a second without feeling something crawl behind my eyes. Something cold and curious. Like it knew I was watching. Claire stood at the freezer's edge, arms folded, jaw tight. It started twitching 2 months ago, she said. Before that, it was inert. Just a preserved specimen I took from the ruins. My insurance policy. You took it from Barrow? Kessler asked, stunned. Claire nodded. When the military moved in, I ran. I'd hidden in the crawl space under the geothermal station, found parts, limbs, not decayed, not bleeding, just alive. I took one. Didn't know why. Kessler's voice cracked. Because it called to you. She looked at him, startled. What? He shook his head. I've seen this behavior in the primate trials. Low-level infected subjects were drawn to active tissue samples. Like the virus was establishing a network. A kind of hive intelligence. I stepped back, hand on my sidearm. You're telling me that thing in there can think? Not think, Kessler said. Listen. He pointed to the rhythmic tapping. It's sending signals, coordinating, like synapses firing. Only now the synapses aren't inside a brain. They are the infected. Claire opened a drawer and pulled out a notepad filled with scribbles. It repeats the same sequences every few hours. At first I thought it was noise. Then I realized it was trying to talk. I translated some of it using a modified NATO codebook. She handed it to me. On the top page, the message read, "We remember the cold. The flesh sleeps in ice. We are not lost." I stared at the paper, throat dry. Jesus, I whispered, they're waiting. Kessler nodded grimly. And when the ice melts? They wake up, Claire finished. The wind howled outside, shaking the window panes. For a second, the library lights flickered. Then came a sound I hoped never to hear again. A slow, deliberate knock. Kessler froze. That was the pattern, he said. The same one from Whittier. Another knock, slower this time. 3 beats. Then silence. Claire locked the freezer door and backed away. We need to leave, she said. Now. We moved quickly through the building, Kessler grabbing the recorder, Claire taking her notes. I covered the front door, heart pounding. The knocking didn't come again. Outside, snow whipped in sideways gusts. The blue sedan with government plates was gone. In its place, a matte black SUV sat idling across the street, headlights off. They found me, Claire whispered. Kessler grabbed her arm. We can't go back to Fairbanks. We go south. Seward, maybe. I know someone with a private plane. I kept my hand on my pistol as we ducked out the side exit and into a narrow alley behind the building. Steam rose from the storm drains. My breath came in short clouds. We were maybe 10 steps from the truck when I saw the first one. It was crouched at the end of the alley, almost human-shaped. Naked from the waist up despite the cold, its skin pale blue, tight over muscle. No hair, no eyes, just smooth bone-white sockets. Its jaw hung slack. Then it moved. God, it moved fast. I shouted and fired once, catching it in the shoulder. It stumbled, but didn't fall. Instead, it screamed. Only the sound wasn't a scream, it was a call. From the snow, others rose. 3, 5, 7. Some of them were wearing partial uniforms, some wore shredded civilian clothes. All of them had the same stretched, pallid skin. Some were missing chunks of flesh. None of them bled. We ran. Kessler hit the ignition as we dove into the car. The engine roared to life, tires spinning on the icy road. I leaned out the back window and fired as they gave chase. One leapt across the hood and slammed into the windshield. Its face pressed against the glass, grinning wide, lips splitting at the corners like a peeled orange. Its mouth moved. It said something. No sound, just the shape of the words. I read its lips. Let us in. Kessler swerved and the thing flew off into a snowbank. We didn't stop. We didn't look back. We made it to a service station 20 miles outside Anchorage before stopping. The place was empty. The clerk was gone. Blood streaked across the counter and into the back office. Claire sat on the floor of the garage bay, shivering. Not from cold, from memory. They're spreading faster now, she said. They don't wait weeks anymore. They don't need full transformation to mimic. It's like the virus is skipping steps. Kessler said nothing, just stared at the snow. I stepped outside for air. That's when I saw the payphone hanging off its hook, the receiver dangling. It was clicking, no dial tone, just a soft pulsing static. Then a voice, my voice. It's me. Let me in. I froze. Then the voice changed. It became Kessler's. Let me in. Then Claire's. Let us in. I ripped the cord from the wall. Back inside, I told them what I'd heard. Claire was already burning her notebooks. They know where we are, she said. If they can mimic voices, they can listen through them too. Through anything. Kessler's hands trembled as he scrawled a symbol on the wall in black marker. A triangle inside a circle, crossed with 3 bars. The signal. It's how they track each other. A viral pulse, emitted through sound. That's what the hand was tapping. It's a beacon. And now they're coming, I said. He nodded. They're always coming. Later that night, I found a letter tucked in Claire's bag. It was written in crayon on the back of a Barrow Elementary lunch menu. The handwriting was a child's, but the message was clear. I see you when you sleep. I hear you when you cry. I remember the blood. I will come back when the world gets warm. We left the gas station before dawn. Seward was 120 miles away. A fishing town tucked along the Gulf of Alaska. Kessler knew a pilot, an old army buddy turned bush charter, who owed him a favor. He doesn't ask questions, Kessler said, which makes him the last good man in this state. Claire didn't say much. She just sat in the back seat, hood up, clutching a thermos like a lifeline. I kept the truck at a steady 60, tires humming over snow-packed asphalt. The only light came from the pale blue horizon and the frost-rimed headlights slicing through the dark. For the first hour the road was empty, silent. But something about the quiet felt wrong. I'd driven these stretches before. Weather patrol, drug sweeps, SAR duty. There were always signs of life. Trucks, moose, gas station neon flickers in the trees. Now, nothing, not even birds. At mile marker 78, we saw the first car. It was jackknifed on the shoulder, driver's side door open, no one inside. No footprints in the snow, just gone. Claire leaned forward. It's getting worse. I glanced at the rear view. What is? She didn't answer, just looked out the window. Around mile 95, the radio crackled. KZZK. Then a voice. This is Anchorage Emergency Broadcast, repeating, all citizens within the southern corridor are advised to shelter in place. Martial law is now in effect. If you are receiving this transmission, do not attempt to return to the city. Repeat. Then static. Kessler turned the dial. They've lost control. God help us. Does your friend in Seward know we're coming? I asked. Kessler nodded. I called from Fairbanks. He was prepping a Cessna for an emergency evac run. If we get to the hangar, we're gone in 20 minutes. And where does that take us? His voice dropped. Not far enough. We hit the outskirts of Moose Pass by noon. It should have been a pit stop, diner, motel, one gas pump. Instead, we rolled through a ghost town. Cars idled in the streets, doors swung open in the wind, a pair of boots sat neatly on a doorstep, still full of melting snow. Kessler motioned to pull over. I want to check the radio tower. Maybe someone left a log. No, Claire said sharply. Kessler blinked. Why? She didn't explain, just shook her head, but I saw it before she said another word. On the radio tower, high above the town, someone had painted a massive red symbol, the same one Kessler drew in the garage. Triangle, circle, 3 bars. Only this time it was surrounded by eyes. Dozens of them, scribbled in charcoal, crying, bleeding, watching. Keep driving, Kessler said. No one argued. We made it to Seward just after 2. The harbour was fog-choked, the bay full of bobbing ice. Fishing boats sat frozen in place, their hulls rimmed with black seaweed and frost. The air reeked of salt and rot. The hangar was at the far end of the airfield, a metal warehouse backed against the tree line. As we pulled in, the doors creaked open. A man stepped out, thick-bearded and broad-shouldered, with a pistol at his hip and a cigarette clenched between his teeth. You're late, he said. Good to see you too, Hank, Kessler muttered. Hank spat into the snow. Didn't know I was volunteering for a damn horror movie. Inside the hangar was a red and white Cessna, its wings dusted with powder. Hank started pre-flight, Kessler helping. Claire stayed close to the wall, eyes darting between shadows. I kept watch by the door. Something wasn't right. I felt it in the air, a kind of tension, like before a lightning strike. My skin itched, the hairs on my neck stood up. Then I heard it. From the trees behind the hangar, a voice, software, familiar. Mike, help me. It was my brother's voice. He died in '93. I turned slowly and stepped outside. Snowflakes drifted. The forest was silent. Then I saw it. A shape, half hidden behind a tree, pale-skinned, ragged coat, face obscured by shadows. Mike, it said again. This time it sounded less human. The voice wavered, doubled back on itself, like 2 tracks overlapping. I raised my gun. Show yourself. The thing stepped out, and it was my brother. Or it looked like him. Same height, same blue parka, same scar on the left cheek from a snowmobile crash when we were kids. But his eyes were gone. Just smooth, glassy skin where they should be. His mouth opened. Let us in. I fired. His head jerked back and he dropped like a rag doll. Then more came. 5, 10, 20. From the woods, from the snowbanks, from beneath the airstrip grates. They ran on all 4s, crawled, twisted. Some still wore bits of clothing, some were completely alien, bone plates protruding from their backs, extra limbs sprouting from rib cages. One had no head at all, but it could still scream. I shouted and ran for the hangar. Claire was already pushing barrels in front of the doors. Kessler and Hank were inside the plane, engines warming. They're here, I yelled. Kessler didn't ask, he just waved us in. The moment we were inside, Hank taxied onto the runway. The creatures swarmed around the hangar, pounding at the walls, screeching with a sound that scraped at the edges of reason. A noise meant to hurt. The plane bounced once, twice, then lifted. As we rose over the bay, I looked down. The infected stood in rows at the edge of the airfield, watching, not chasing, waiting. One of them raised its arm, a slow, deliberate wave. Claire saw it too. Her face went pale. "They're not trying to stop us," she whispered. "They want us to go." "Why?" I asked. But she didn't answer. Instead, she opened her thermos and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. The severed hand, still twitching, still tapping. "Claire," Kessler said, "what are you doing?" She looked at us, eyes wide. "They told me to bring it south." The Cessna touched down on a stretch of abandoned highway outside a town called Talkeetna. According to Hank, it was the closest airstrip still operating that wasn't flagged by Homeland Security. "After Anchorage went dark," he muttered. "I don't trust any of 'em." As the plane coasted to a stop, the sun was dipping behind the mountains. Long shadows stretched across the road, and the trees stood like frozen sentinels. "We stay here tonight," Hank said. "Too much frost on the wings for another takeoff without risking a stall." I didn't like it. The town was a husk. Gas pumps dry, stores looted, buildings wide open like cracked teeth. No people, no voices. Just the wind whispering through broken windows. Claire kept the thermos close. She hadn't said a word since revealing she'd brought the hand. I watched her closely. She hadn't blinked in hours. That night, we found a boarded-up hunting lodge a few miles from the strip. It had a fireplace, a stockpile of canned food, and half a bottle of whiskey tucked behind the logs. I took first watch while the others tried to sleep. At 2:11 a.m., Claire sat up, rigid, not stirred, not groggy, just sat up. I moved toward her. "Claire, you okay?" She turned her head slowly, unnaturally. "They're talking now," she whispered. I felt the hair on my arms rise. "Who's talking?" She didn't answer right away, her eyes unfocused, her mouth slack. Then she said, in a voice not entirely her own, "The sleeper wakes. The ice remembers. The seed is planted." She blinked, like waking from a trance, and clutched her chest. "Mike, I think it's in me." Kessler and Hank woke at the noise. Claire rocked on her heels, hands trembling. I didn't feel sick. Not once. No fever, no pain. But the hand, it speaks in my dreams. Kessler knelt beside her. "Claire, you were infected in Barrow. Maybe you're immune, a carrier, a latent." "I hear them," she said. "They know where I am." "What do they want?" She looked me in the eye. "You." We left at dawn. The truck Hank had stashed nearby still ran, and we loaded it with fuel and food. Claire sat in the back, bundled in layers, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. Kessler kept scribbling in his journal, every so often glancing at Claire's hands, as though waiting for them to change. As we rolled down the frost-slick highway, I kept scanning the woods. They weren't empty. Shapes moved between the trees, thin humanoid silhouettes, some with broken limbs that moved too smoothly, others that stopped and stood as we passed, just watching. They didn't attack, didn't chase, just observed. "What are they doing?" I asked. Claire's voice was almost inaudible. "They're shepherding us." At mile 237, we found another roadblock. A CDC checkpoint, half collapsed, manned by bodies in white hazmat suits, slumped in their chairs, rifles frozen to their hands. The air reeked of rot and ozone. Kessler pulled one of the IDs from a corpse and read the lanyard. "Dr. Elena Ramirez. Level 4 biohazard control." I spotted a laptop still powered on, faint glow barely visible in the daylight. Its screen blinked with a looping file. "Project Chrysalis, containment protocol violation." Code Omega. Kessler tapped through. His eyes went wide. They knew. They all knew. The government didn't just discover the pathogen in Barrow, they extracted it. Decades ago. During Operation Cold Shroud, I leaned over his shoulder. The next file was a thermal satellite image of northern Alaska. Beneath the glaciers, highlighted in red, was a massive circular formation, like a buried hive. "Jesus," I said. "How long has it been there?" Claire answered. "Since before the ice." We took shelter that night in an old ranger station. Bunk beds and dusty logs of tree surveys lined the shelves. Hank stayed on the roof, watching the horizon. Kessler and I sat by the fire, drinking from the last of the whiskey. Claire stayed in the corner, eyes closed, mouth moving. I couldn't hear her at first. Then I leaned in. She was repeating a phrase over and over. The bone door opens. The sky will peel. He walks again. I shook her. Claire! She gasped and looked around, disoriented, then grabbed my wrist. I saw him in the dream. He's not infected. He's not like them. He's older. Who? The first, the original, the one who made the virus. Or maybe is the virus. Kessler leaned forward. A sentient origin point. Claire nodded. He was underground, not dead, just waiting. Trapped in something like stone, like bone. He doesn't speak with words, he feeds thoughts, makes them bloom. She turned her head toward the window. He's waking up. That night I dreamed of cold, not just winter, but a cold that crept into the soul, the kind that whispers. In the dream, I stood inside a massive cave, walls lined with frozen corpses. At the center was a cocoon the size of a city bus, pulsing with light. It throbbed in time with the hands tapping. Then it split, and something stepped out. It wasn't human, not anymore. It wore a man's face like a mask. My face. It looked at me and smiled. I've always been you. I woke up screaming. So did Claire. In the morning, we found something in the snow outside the station, a message, written in blood and frost on the hood of the truck. Thank you for bringing it home. Claire stared at it for a long time, then she turned to us. It's not just a virus anymore. Kessler swallowed. What is it? She opened the thermos and showed us the hand again. Only now it wasn't twitching, it was growing. Tiny filaments of bone were sprouting from the wrist, forming fingers, nerves, veins. It's rebirthing, Claire whispered. It's making a vessel. For what? She looked me straight in the eyes. For him. We left the ranger station at sunrise. None of us had truly slept. The dreams were worse now. They weren't just images. They bled. Each of us described different places, different people, but with one constant. The voice. A chorus that hummed under our skin, feeding thoughts that weren't our own. The hand was changing faster, veins like black wires stretched from its wrist, burrowing into the thermos metal. It pulsed in sync with Claire's heartbeat now. She didn't resist it anymore. She whispered to it, listened, and sometimes it whispered back. Kessler picked up a signal outside Palmer, a garbled burst of code on a buried military channel spliced with something else, a human voice, barely audible beneath static. Echo, Vault, 47, buried below. We knew what it meant. Vault 47. A Cold War-era black site supposedly mothballed in the 80s. If the government knew anything about what they'd dug up under the ice, it would be there, and Claire was already nodding before we even said it. I know the way. The vault's location was disguised beneath an old radar installation, abandoned on paper, but surrounded by rusting sentry guns and decayed barbed wire. Satellite dishes leaned like broken teeth over the hilltop. The sign read, U.S. Weather Surveillance Station 4B. But Kessler found the truth. He brushed snow from a panel on the ground, revealing a keypad so old the numbers had worn away. From his coat, he produced a notepad, worn and torn. Got this from a guy I interrogated in '98. He swore on his life this code opened a door to hell. The numbers clicked. Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe. Something deep underground thumped, and then, with the hiss of hydraulic release, a metal hatch opened at the base of a concrete slab, revealing a steel staircase descending into pitch black. Claire clutched the thermos. He's here. The descent took almost 10 minutes. Flickering emergency lights barely lit the way, casting crimson shadows along the stairwell. The deeper we went, the colder it became, not from lack of heat, but something else. A wrongness in the air, like the oxygen itself was rotting. The final door was labeled Vault 47, Project Chrysalis Authorized Personnel Only Biological Hazard. Level Omega Kessler swiped the stolen ID badge. The door groaned open. What we saw inside would haunt me forever. Rows of containment pods lined the walls. Each one held a human, or something that used to be. Some floated in green fluid, bloated and still. Others twitched, violently, limbs mutating and reshaping in real time. One creature had no face, just smooth skin that occasionally stretched into mouths and eyes before vanishing again. In the center of the room, a massive tank pulsed with light. The cocoon. Just like in my dream, except it was real. Claire stepped forward. They tried to kill him, to freeze him, to break his connection to the hive. Did they succeed? I asked. She turned, eyes wide. Number they fed him. Kessler flipped through a terminal's logs. His face went pale. These aren't just infected, they're composites, grown from samples, mixed with DNA from volunteers, soldiers, scientists, psychics. He tapped a log file. Subject 0A, remote neural communion test. Result, breach. Subject 0B, hive cognition spread beyond facility. Result, termination failed. Subject 0. C. Dream seed fragment. Grown in containment. Active thought pattern detected. Jesus, he whispered. They were trying to talk to it. Behind a glass wall, we found a control room. Its floor was littered with bones, clothing, and discarded scalpels. On the monitor was a recording, time-stamped November 12, 1995. A man in a lab coat stood before the camera. Dr. Frank Maddox, head of biocontainment according to his badge. He looked exhausted. His hands trembled. If you're seeing this, then containment has failed. Project Chrysalis was not what we thought. We believed the pathogen to be ancient, possibly extraterrestrial, something preserved in the ice. But the truth is worse. It wasn't buried, it was grown. By something that called to us. Something in the earth, something beneath it. He leaned forward, blood on his lips. We didn't find a virus. We found a god. The screen went black. Claire walked to the tank. The cocoon inside pulsed. It wasn't stone or bone. It was organic. Veined and twitching. 1,000 tiny filaments crawled across the surface, etching shifting runes. Symbols like the ones from the garage, and the tower, and the thermos. He wants out, Claire said. And I'm the door. Kessler raised his gun. Number, we end this here. Claire didn't flinch. You can't kill it. You can't even understand it. But maybe you can contain it again. She opened the thermos. The hand floated up like it was swimming. It grew, mid-air, tendrils weaving from bone, flesh knitting itself in spirals of impossible geometry. It hovered over the cocoon, then entered it, burrowing into its shell. The whole room screamed. Not with sound, with thought. Every light burst. The air turned thick. Kessler dropped to his knees, nose bleeding. I collapsed, images flooding my mind, cities crumbling, skies cracking open, stars rearranging into a new language. Then silence. The cocoon stopped pulsing. The light stabilized. Claire was gone. So was the cocoon. In its place stood a single word, scorched into the tank wall. Exodus. We staggered out of Vault 47 hours later, barely speaking. The sky above was overcast, pale grey. But it felt wrong, like it was closer, like it was watching. Claire's thermos lay empty. The dreams haven't stopped. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear her voice whisper, "He's not in the ice anymore. He's in the blood. He's in you." The air felt wrong as soon as we stepped outside Vault 47. The frost, the wind, the smell of old dying pine. It was all the same. But there was something else. A weight in the sky, like it was about to split open. The wind wasn't right either. It whispered back now. Kessler stumbled, wiping his nose. Blood. His hand trembled. "What the hell just happened, Mike?" he rasped. I didn't know. I could still hear Claire's voice. Faint, distant. The hand's last whispers echoed through my skull like an aftershock. I clutched my head, but it didn't stop. It never stopped. "It's not over," I muttered. "No," Kessler agreed, his face pale. "Whatever that thing was, it's not done with us." The snow around us was still, too still. The world had gone silent. No birds, no wind, no hum of machinery. It was as if the earth itself had taken a breath and held it. And then I heard it. At first, it was like a hum, a deep, vibrating note beneath the earth. It rattled my teeth, rattled my bones. Then louder, an inhuman screech. It wasn't just an animal. It wasn't a machine. It was alive. "Run!" Kessler shouted. I grabbed him, pulling him toward the truck, but as we moved, the ground began to shake. Not with an earthquake, with a pulse. Each tremor felt like it was calling something in the distance, something alive, something that wasn't supposed to be. We didn't make it far. A figure emerged from the tree line, its outline barely visible in the whiteout. It was too tall, too twisted. It moved with unnatural fluidity, its limbs stretching, growing, contorting as it walked. Eyes glowed from within its head, bright and empty. The figure's skin was smooth, but not in a human way. It gleamed under the pale sky, rippling with layers of something like liquid. "Shit," Kessler whispered. The thing didn't move like an animal. It moved like a thought, disjointed, jagged, but somehow graceful. And as it stepped into the clearing, its eyes locked onto us. I knew what it was. We all did. It was him, the one Claire had been talking about. The first, the one who made the virus. It had woken, and it wasn't alone. Behind the thing, another figure emerged. Then another, and another, dozens of them. Twisted, pale figures, their bodies barely holding onto their human shapes. But it wasn't just the shape that terrified me. It was the sound. A chorus of voices, not human, but not fully inhuman either. A low hum, a drone that pierced the skull. It wasn't words. It wasn't a language. It was an intention. They weren't just creatures. They were thoughts. It was like staring into the void, except the void was staring back. And then I heard Claire's voice again. "It's time." The truck barely started. Hank was behind the wheel, his hands shaking, eyes wide with fear. "I can't outrun them," he yelled, slamming his foot on the gas. But the figures were already too close. I glanced back at the creatures. They weren't running. They didn't need to. They followed. They were in the air now, not flying, but floating. Their limbs twisted unnaturally as they moved, gliding in a way that defied physics. Their eyes never left us. But the worst part, they were learning. Every time one of us panicked, they grew stronger. Every time Hank swerved or Kessler shouted, they grew. They fed off fear. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to think. We had no weapons, no defenses. The road was nothing but snow and ice. They'd catch us in minutes. "We need to find a place to hide," I shouted. "Somewhere they can't." But before I could finish, the world shuddered. The ground beneath us cracked open, and an enormous thing emerged from the earth. It was massive. Its body was like stone, like earth itself had taken shape, grown limbs, grown eyes. And its voice, God help me, was like 1,000 screams, all layered on top of each other. "I am the seed. I am the one who will harvest." The figure loomed above us, its mouth splitting open into an impossible maw, filled with teeth made of ice and bone. The truck jerked to a stop as the earth trembled beneath us. The ground began to break apart, the ice shattering in all directions, as though the planet itself was cracking open. We were trapped. The figure loomed closer. Its massive form towered over us, dwarfing the truck. And then it stopped. It didn't move any closer. It didn't speak. It just watched. But the others were still coming, the smaller ones, the horde. Kessler pulled out the last of our weapons, a flare gun, and fired it into the sky. The flare shot up, burning bright and red. Nothing happened. The figure's eyes glowed brighter, almost in response. Then, to my horror, I saw the sky shift. The clouds didn't just part, they split. Like paper. An enormous tear opened in the atmosphere, revealing a sky that wasn't our sky. 1,000 stars pulsed from within, as though the fabric of reality was being peeled back. And through that rift, I saw something. A shape, a vast dark shape, like a ship, no, a beast, waking in the darkness of space, its form stretching and flickering like a living dream. "Close the rift," I shouted, but Hank was already gone, racing away in the truck as fast as the ice would allow. But I knew it was too late. The rift wasn't just in the sky, it was everywhere. The world was breaking. By the time the sun set, we were far from the site. But I could still feel it. The humming. And now the world was in sync with it. I closed my eyes and saw it. The thing that had waited. The thing that was waiting. It was coming. And it would never stop. We didn't stop. We couldn't. The truck was barely functional, swerving dangerously on the icy roads, but Hank didn't seem to care. His hands were shaking and his face was twisted with fear. We all felt it. That feeling. The one that had followed us since Vault 47, a gnawing sensation in the pit of our stomachs that refused to leave. The world was coming apart, and we were running out of time. I glanced at Kessler. His face was pale, his eyes distant. He was watching something that wasn't there. Or maybe it was something we couldn't see. I didn't know anymore. He turned to me. Do you think we're the only ones? That it's just us? And this thing? Or are there others out there? I didn't answer, because the truth was I didn't know. The crack in the sky was still there. Even now I could see it out of the corner of my eye, like a dark tear in the fabric of the world. The rift had grown, not just a jagged hole, but an expanding wound in the heavens, its edges flickering like broken glass, showing glimpses of something beyond. It wasn't just a storm. It wasn't just a glitch in reality. It was everything. Reality was being rewritten, piece by piece, and those things, the creatures that had risen from the ice, the ones Claire had called the Seed, were only the beginning. We were too close now, too close to the truth. Hank slammed on the brakes, sending us into a wild skid. The truck spun out on the icy road, and we came to a stop against a snowbank with a violent jolt. I could feel my chest tighten. I had no breath left to scream. Outside, the world was quiet again. Too quiet. But it was the wrong kind of quiet. A stillness that gripped the air like a vice, pressing down on everything. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath. And then I heard it. A voice, not a sound that came through the truck's radio or from a loudspeaker. It wasn't anything external. It was inside my head. We've seen you. We've heard you. It wasn't Claire this time. It was them. The creatures that had followed us. The ones who had risen from the depths of the earth. We are already here. I slammed my hands over my ears, trying to drown out the voice, but it wasn't enough. The words weren't coming through the air. They were coming from within, as if my own thoughts had been hijacked. I could hear them all around me, 1,000 voices, layered on top of each other, vibrating through my skull. The voices of those who had fallen into the depths before us. The ones who had been absorbed. I could feel their hunger. Kessler shouted something, but it was muffled. His voice seemed to crack, splitting into multiple tones, distorting. I turned to him and saw that his face had gone ashen. His eyes were wide with terror, but something was off about them. His pupils were shifting, flickering between different sizes, like something was pulling at his very essence. They're inside my head, Kessler said, his voice low, distorted. Mike, I can hear them. I reached for his arm, but he jerked away. We need to move, Hank said, his voice tight with panic. He was already unbuckling his seatbelt, fumbling with the door handle. We can't stay here. But when he opened the door, the world outside was different. The snow was still there, but it wasn't normal. It shimmered, almost like it was alive, swirling and twisting in strange patterns. The air was thick now, too thick to breathe properly. My lungs burned with every breath, like I was inhaling something toxic. And then I saw it. In the distance, a shape, not a person. A shadow. It moved in jerky, unnatural motions, and then I saw the flicker of a second figure. And a third. Then 100 more. They were coming. They were everywhere. The Seed was already here. We ran. There was no other choice. We stumbled through the snow, trying to find cover, but the world was already collapsing around us. The sky above us was like a bruised, roiling mass of clouds and black voids. The tear in the sky had grown wider, and from it something was starting to seep through, something that wasn't human. Where do we go? Kessler asked, his voice distant as though he was speaking from underwater. Anywhere, I shouted, just away from here. But there was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. The thing we had unleashed had already spread across the land, and its reach went beyond the ice. The figures were coming closer. They didn't need to run. They didn't need to chase us. They knew. They already knew where we were. They saw everything. There were more of them now. I could hear their voices, faint whispers in the wind. Sometimes they spoke to each other, sometimes they spoke to us. Sometimes they just hummed, vibrating through the air, making the ground beneath our feet shake. I looked back. The first creature had stopped. It was no longer moving. It stood in the snow, watching us. Its eyes glowed brighter now, illuminating the landscape like two burning stars in the night. And then it spoke. "The harvest is near." I felt a chill down my spine as the ground beneath me trembled. The wind picked up, howling like a hurricane. Kessler collapsed beside me, his body shaking violently. His eyes were no longer his own. They were clouded, vacant. Something was crawling inside him. He gripped my arm. "Join us." The rest of the world went dark. "Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe." I woke up in the snow. My body was stiff, my head pounding. My eyes were blurry, and for a moment I wasn't sure where I was. The world was still quiet, too quiet. I couldn't hear the wind. I couldn't hear anything. I stood up, shaking off the dizziness. It was hard to breathe. The air was thick. Like the sky itself had changed, like the whole world had shifted into a new phase. I turned, looking for Hank and Kessler. They were gone. There were no traces of their bodies, no footprints in the snow. But I wasn't alone. I felt a presence behind me. I could feel its eyes on me. The thing had followed. The cold hit me like a slap across the face. The wind bit into my skin, but it wasn't the cold that chilled me to the bone. It was the silence. The world had stopped. No sounds of distant creatures. No hum of the rift in the sky. No echoes of the voices that had once haunted my mind. It was as if the entire planet had drawn a breath and held it. The creatures, the seed, had gone silent. But it didn't mean they were gone. They were closer now. I could feel them. I staggered forward, my eyes scanning the snow-covered landscape. There was no sign of Hank or Kessler. They had disappeared, vanished into the endless white, swallowed by the silence. I didn't know where they were. I didn't know if they were still alive. The air was too thick to tell. It pressed down on me, as though the world itself was suffocating. Then I saw it. In the distance, the rift in the sky was wider than before, jagged and ragged. It was no longer just a tear. It was an opening, a wound that stretched across the heavens, pouring out dark, shifting energy like ink spilling from an open bottle. And through it, something was emerging, a shape, a massive shape, too vast to comprehend. I couldn't tear my eyes away. I didn't want to. But I knew deep in my gut, that if I didn't run now, if I didn't escape, I would never see another sunrise. I turned and started running, my boots crunching through the snow, but my legs felt heavy. Every step seemed to take longer. The air felt thick, oppressive. The ground beneath me trembled slightly with each footfall. I knew the creatures were out there, somewhere. Watching. Waiting. I didn't know how many were still left, how many had changed, how many had become something beyond human. The figures I had seen before, those twisted, deformed versions of people, were no longer flesh. They were something else, something far older, something more dangerous, and they were aware. I stumbled, falling into the snow, my body protesting the cold. I tried to rise, but my arms shook with exhaustion, my breath coming in shallow gasps. And then a voice. It wasn't inside my head. It wasn't a hum. It wasn't a whisper. It was real. "We told you. We told you, Mike Landry." The voice wasn't just one. It was all of them, speaking in unison, as though the seed had become a collective, one single consciousness spread across the earth. I turned. The creature stood before me. The first one. The one who had watched us from the beginning. Its eyes were glowing, brighter now, more intense than ever before. It was standing tall, its body almost shimmering in the dim light of the broken sky. The other creatures were behind it, forming a semicircle, blocking any path I might have had for escape. It spoke again, its voice deep, vibrating through my chest. "You should have listened. You should have understood." I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. I could feel it. Feel the knowledge, the ancient, insidious force coursing through my mind. It was all connected. The outbreak, the rift, the harvest. The seed weren't just creatures. They were something far more complex. They were the beginning, the end, and everything in between. They had existed long before humanity, long before this earth had even formed. The pathogen, the virus. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a mistake. It was the seed of something much older, something that had been waiting to awaken. And now it had found us. This world is ours now. It always has been. You were never meant to survive. I dropped to my knees, the weight of their words crashing down on me. I had seen the truth about the pathogen, the truth about the creatures, the truth about the rift in the sky. It was all connected to them, the seed, and there was no stopping them now. The rift was wide enough for the entire world to see. The Great Awakening had begun. I heard a sound behind me, a rumble, the ground shaking beneath my feet. I turned. The beast had risen. It was massive, larger than anything I could have ever imagined. It was no longer a shadow, but a towering, living entity, dark as night and yet filled with a flickering energy that almost seemed to pulse with life. Its shape was impossible to define, too vast to be understood by the human mind. It looked like a ship, a creature, and a god all at once. And it was alive. I could feel its presence deep in my bones. And the creatures, the seed, they were inside it. It was them. We have returned, and you will join us. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My heart pounded in my chest. The cold, the silence, the creatures. It was all too much. Everything was unraveling. But just as I thought it was over, just as I thought the world would end, I felt something in my chest. A flicker, a thought, a voice. There is another way. I looked around. No one was there, no one alive. But the voice was still with me. It was Claire's voice. I remembered what she had said back at the vault, the journal, the knowledge, the truth, the key to everything. But it was too late. The rift was here, the seed were here, and the world was no longer ours. The sky shattered. I awoke to a world that no longer existed. The rift had consumed everything. Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe.